Hi, everyone who's here. We are so thrilled to have you at our webinar today. We're here to talk about increasing student impact and agency in critical times, and we have this talk with some very inspiring program leaders. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Gitanjali Paul. I'm the Education Program Manager at Compass Education, and I'm thrilled to moderate for you today. Compass Education, in case you don't already know, is a global movement of educators and change agents who believe in a flourishing, sustainable world that begins with our students and our schools. We support this through workshops, courses, and sharing resources, and we're a largely educator and volunteer-based network. So we believe unequivocally that educators are change agents, and we're so happy to be able to highlight some of those amazing change agent educators today in this panel. And this is just such an opportunity to hear about their experiences, the range of backgrounds they have, and the different global perspectives they can share with us today. We're going to be hearing today from Britta McCarthy, Steve Sostak, Lynda, Rolph, and Darcy Lunn. And after some introductions from each of them, we're going to get a peek into their thinking and their ideas through a conversation on this topic. So I am thrilled to start today with Britta McCarthy, who is the Assistant Director for Learning and Curriculum Development at Columbus Schools in Medellin, Colombia. Britta is an Arizona native in the United States who has lived in South America for the last 10 years. She's a former science and social studies teacher, currently, like I said, working as the Assistant Director of Learning for Curriculum Development at the Columbus School in Medellin. Her favorite teaching and learning experiences involve sustainability, systems thinking, and authentic project-based pedagogy.
Hi, everyone. Good morning and good evening. It's night where I'm at, but it's good to see you all. And I'm just realizing because it's night, my lighting's a little bit funky, but hopefully y'all can hear me and see me good enough for me to transmit my excitement for systems and all the things that we're going to talk about tonight. So I do describe myself, I get very excited as a fangirl for systems thinking and Compass. It's one of the things that I feel of all the things that you learn in a school community and try to do and try to get traction around. It's like the one thing that I feel like we really internalized as an institution at the Columbus School, and it's made such a huge difference for us and for student agency. So at Columbus School, we've set up our professional development around these continuums that move from teacher-controlled environments towards environments with more student agency. And that all sounds great, like so many things that are theoretical and on paper. And then, you get it into the PD and the staff were like, but how? Give me the resources. How do I do this? And Compass has been, I think, probably the highest leverage item that we really have invested in and learned around as a community that's helped us get there. So, and not that it's a destination, not that we've arrived and, all student agency, but it's something that in an ongoing fashion really helps our students think in a more interconnected way, in a more critical way, and in a way that allows them to act as the leaders that they're meant to be. So I think the why, I think the question was, why should we be working for student agency? It just feels like a must at this point. Like, I remember this notion when I was in university of like, we have to prepare students for the real world, right? Like, as if they're not in the real world now, which is kind of funny because I feel like I repeated that message coming out of university, and it's just so clear now that they're already in the real world and they already have the ability to make so much impact if we let them lead. And when we do that, there's incredible results. We see them transforming the school community. We see them starting businesses before they graduate high school. We see them actually becoming the things that we dream of on the school vision statements. They don't just, they're not the things on the wall where all the pretty words are there, but they really are living that through their actions. So I think the why is simply like, it's survival in schools nowadays. We have to promote agency because it's not about getting them ready for the real world. They're already in it. And through systems and through thinking about agency, I think we're starting to have a big cultural shift where we're starting to become more comfortable with student voice and students leading and students being on the stage. And now when that's not there, the culture is like, well, what do the students think about this? Or like, why haven't students taken a part in this anymore? So I think it's a really critical movement towards student agency because it has to be, and because it's already very real. I also feel that just trying to do school, I'm going to call it the old way, because so many things have happened in the pandemic, but kind of traditional and like just getting through the curriculum and assessment and all of those things. I don't know if this is a worldwide phenomena, but in our campus, it's really not cutting it anymore. Like everything has to be very authentic to be motivating to our students. And it's really hard for students to play the game of school in the old way. So I'll share a few images just to kind of help, share the story. But we have Compass embedded in a lot of places. It's in our leadership team, it's in our extracurriculars, it's in our curricular classes. This is one example. We have a fair called San Alejo that was originally envisioned to be a fair where we could raise money for social projects and charities in the community with things that the students made from recycled items. And over the years, it became, I think something got lost. And the students started noticing like, this was supposed to be a recycled fair and now everything's wrapped in plastic and it's water bottles and we've got spray painted glitter styrofoam balls at our recycled craft fair. And the students, from understanding systems, we asked them like, how can we fix this? How can we kind of take back the reins and turn this event back into what it was really meant to be? And they had taken part in something in their history class with a compass sort activity, where you kind of have some of those pre-made items. So they went to the fair and they wrote out all of these things that they had observed. And they started a meeting with some of the parent organizers of the San Alejo Fair. You can see the Post-it notes are the observations and things that the parents said. So they gave them input. Then they had their pre-made sort activity ready to go that they shared with the parents. And together they were just able to lead this conversation where we were able to ground back into the intention of the fair, the unwanted impact of the fair, and 45 minutes, a compass and students in the room with the parents. It was just incredibly effective at helping us consider the difference between the intention and the impact and get back on track. And that was, the tool that I think really helped students lead the conversation. And compass is just one of those things that they pull to immediately as like, right, how are we going to do this? Well, let's start with the compass. It's like they have internalized that as like the way to get the conversation started. Think about all of the things that that they need to get out on the table to really think sustainably about anything. During the pandemic, we didn't have as much hands-on stuff happening on campus, but we've been working in sustainability in our extracurriculars for years. And we came back and we're like, wow, there is just so much plastic on campus. And it really is about hygiene and safety and, biosecurity, as we say in Colombia. And the students did a lot of systems work. And eventually, like, these are also plastic, but they're not disposable. They're washable trays that there are lids that go onto. So we were able to, negotiate with the cafeteria provider to think of a solution that was long lasting and that didn't involve throwing, for our school campus, thousands of pieces of single-use disposable plastics away every day. This was a greenhouse project that was initiated 8 years ago by students in our science and tech classes. And greenhouses, they're great, they're hands-on, they produce food. There's so many things that are fantastic about them, but we kept having this, like, we grow the food and then summer happens and we have all this overgrown stuff and we don't really have a system for it. Our students, like, using systems tools, they were able to create an entire curriculum that was aligned to standards to go with this. And for me, like that just speaks to agency so much. We had this thing that was capable of so much that we were trying to maintain. And now, sorry? All
You're
good?
okay to continue. Yeah.
Okay. This is kind of just something I wanted to share as like what it turned into. These are our students. I'm there with my camera off, training the teachers that teach the second graders first to use a compass, thinking about sustainable agriculture and sustainability, and then to go work in the greenhouse to experience that firsthand. So there's just so many important switches that make student agency and using systems feel like a must at this point for me. And I hope that I've painted, a small picture into how that's embedded in different parts of the school community. But the best thing is really just partnering with students that are doing the work and are so active in it, and they're grabbing at the systems tools to make the change happen. It's become very natural, and that is why I am a fangirl for Compass systems thinking, and just in general, a project-based learning set of tools. Thank you for the space, and I look forward to hearing from all of you here.
Thank you so much, Britta. We are going to get to hear more from you a bit later, which is going to be fantastic. What an interesting way to start, by seeing all of these student-initiated projects that are using systems thinking to really get into what can they do, and very much directed by their own observations. So great way to start. Thank you so much. And I want to now take us over to hear from Darcy Lunn. So I am thrilled to be hearing from Darcy today as well. Darcy's dreams in daily life are dedicated to seeing a world with access and opportunity for everyone, everywhere. He joined Dulwich in August of 2020 in a full-time role as Group Head of Sustainability and Global Citizenship. For the past 20 years, Darcy has experienced more than 90 countries, given over 1,700 presentations to 150,000 plus people, and worked with leading development, environmental, social justice, and global education organizations and people. So Darcy, I'm very happy to hand it over to you to hear more about your work and how you approach building student agency.
Thanks, Gitanjali. Yeah, that sounds far more formal than I really am. I'm just sort of a guy that goes running and floats around and stays on people's couches. That's the real bio, I suppose. Hi from Chongqing. I'm in the middle of China. I'm trying to avoid COVID lockdowns at the moment, so I'm doing fairly well at that, to be honest. But yeah, generally I'm working with a group of schools and around global citizenship, sustainability, all these sorts of things. But I did want to kick off with this question. So check out the chat. I'd be interested to know, people who are joining us, where you're at in terms of a spectrum from 1 to 10 of knowing about compass education and systems thinking. And I picked this up from Tim Ferriss. There's not many things I pick up from Tim Ferriss, but one thing that I did pick up from was to try and avoid the number 7. When you were asked about how do you feel about something, 7's such a mediocre, middle ground, mamby-pamby place to be. So where is everyone in terms of systems thinking and compass education? If you're brand new to this, you might be a 1 to 4 to 5. That's fantastic. That's why you're here. Or you could be, living and breathing compass like Britta does, and on the 9 to 10 spectrum. And so we can share all these different ideas. Steve, I think you're diminishing yourself with a 9-ish. I'd be going 11 on the scale there. Janine, oh, cool. Good to see you from Shanghai and West there. Starting off on the course, number 4, that's cool. Brandon on a 6, that's good. So bit of familiarity there. Carol, 4, lovely. Brian, a 6. Terry, 5. Haven't seen any 7s yet. This is good. Nice one. So cool. This just gives me a bit of an idea, because my presentation is very different to Britta's. I think, Britta, yours is lovely to show the practical application of compass in schools. And what I tend to have to do is explain what the hell is systems thinking and what is this compass. So that's where I tend to come from, is explaining big concepts so people can try and access them and then utilize them in the way that Britta and her school does in Medellin. Very jealous to be there in Medellin. So let me do a quick little screen share here. Okay, so every conversation I pretty much have, and that's even just ordering my noodles at lunchtime, starts with the SDGs. So our global goals, they're great, they're big. I've got them in my background, good on me. But they don't really mean much to us. How the hell do we put these huge, big concept into our personal lives? And so this is where I created a concept called teaspoons of change. So to try and look at the personal choices, decisions, and actions that have an impact on people on the planet. So that if we can think about it from a personal level, then we can connect it to that collective context of the SDGs. So that's kind of my shtick, where I go around and share this with schools. But where this fits in with Compass is in a whole bunch of different ways. So the other thing we've got here are the good life goals. And if you're not familiar with these, definitely check them out. Again, they're kind of a nice stepping stone towards the global goals and helping us understand them from a more personal, practical level. They're not particularly child friendly. They're not designed for school students, but the icons and those sorts of things definitely makes them more accessible. So for me, it's about setting up things like teaspoons of change, these stepping stones towards realizing that we're one person in a finite planet with 7.5 billion other people. And so Compass is a really essential part of my toolkit when I'm engaging with schools and teachers and students. And the way that I came across Compass, well, actually, I came across Compass many years ago at NIST and all sorts of different places. But we do have this little thing called a Global Citizenship Collective, of which Steve and Inspire Citizens are part of as well, a few of us here on this call. And we decided that we feel that our energy and our efforts are better combined than they are separate. So we share these ideas. We have a catch up once a month. Nicole thought it was tomorrow and scared me a little bit, but that's okay. And then, but we try and get together so we can share these ideas, keep building our momentum. And anyone who's on this call, if you interact with any of these organizations, I love the fact that we're talking to each other behind the scenes. So I use Compass all the time. Compass might blurt out teaspoons of change here. We're going to be using Inspire Citizens to get into the weeds and get our students and teachers to be going deep into these things. So this is a really cool space that I just want to share with you, that we're doing the work behind the scenes so that when you can come to places like Compass, we're connecting and evolving as we go along. So look, let me bring it back to Compass and thinking about the way that I try and share this. So look, acting personally and locally is about impacting globally. And this is where I think Compass really enhances this. It's very easy to say this. There's probably a t-shirt with it on somewhere and, up on a poster in the school or, plastered over the walls everywhere. But, how do we actually make it happen? And so understanding the Compass is a really good place to start. And if you're not sure, we've got nature, society, well-being, economy. So how does this one idea, how does it connect in all those different ways? And Britta gave us that beautiful example or examples with her students in Medellin. And so for the way that I'm starting to use this at the moment, or just recently, which was top of mind, is around the economic side of things and environmental. So yes, sustainability is great. It's a bit of a buzzword at the moment. I've been saying the same stuff for 20 years and now I have some more relevance because other people are talking about it, which is great. But I'm actually really keen for our group of schools and schools in general to move into the space of restorative and regenerative. Like, how do we go beyond sustainability? And again, this is where the Compass for me is a really important talking point to say, yeah, it's great to look after our planet and not use plastic straws. But actually, that's a great place to start. But look, there's a whole world out there that's about equality, racism, diversity, all these different components, well-being, etc. And so if I'm going to try and bring these big concepts to our schools and our students and our teachers, I need to keep packing it in with all these tips and tricks and ideas as we go along. Speaking of compasses and circles and all these sorts of things, donut economics is another thing I draw upon. And when I'm using compass and donut, these are just fantastic ideas. If you're not familiar with Kate Raworth, I don't want to explain it too much, but basically it means living within planetary limits outside of the donut, not trashing our planet, and making sure that human needs are met as well. So we don't go inside the donut. So the donut is the sweet spot where we can do these things. And when I use donut and compass together, Sounds like then you can go exploring for ages. That's great. Then students and teachers, etc., just get this really cool connection between some of these concepts that we talk and think about, but putting them into practical action. And so then I'd give them heaps of examples of where this sort of happens. And this is a good version from a junior school adaptation of donut economics with big conversations and talking about what is a good business, what do good businesses look like, how will we know if a business is good, you know, where do things come from, and just to provocate those questions and that expansion of thinking and perspective. So, excuse me, so that's where compass, donut economics, etc., all these things work in unison. And if I ever have to boil it down into something and as students come up to me and say, I lost my pencil, and it's like, oh, that's okay. You know, I've lost plenty of pencils as well in my life, but just remember, you know, everything is made by someone, from something, from somewhere. And give them a huge moral bashing and a guilt trip. That isn't the idea. You know, don't want anyone crying that they've lost their pencil, but I do like that it's an opportunity for that expansion of thinking. And then, you know, if you have the compass up in your room, it's like, remember, you know, there's lots of different aspects to the choices and things that we make. And so when we can make good choices, we know that it has a positive impact in all sorts of different ways. So yeah, making people feel like that they can make a difference. So when I'm put into a corner and said, okay, what is global citizenship? What does it mean? For me, it's just knowing that I'm connected to society, economy, well-being, and nature. So this is a really nice definition. I hate definitions, but a nice way to be thinking of global citizenship when we use it fairly flippantly, fairly regularly as well. And I do believe we are all global citizens. Congratulations, especially if you're in Medellin. But there is a thing here that, for me, that connects all of this together, is that if we're doing our personal actions, call them teaspoons of change, whatever you want, that helps us connect us to being a more active and effective global citizen, which connects us into being, into contributing to those global goals. So Compass is a really good way of kind of bringing this concept into the practical application, conceptual into practice. And then this works also in reverse. If we're starting by thinking about the global goals, we need to, so we want to act on those global goals. We need to think as global citizens and then act in our teaspoons of change. So I find using the Compass model, you know, what are the SDGs that are connected to it? And then what is my personal, you know, action that I can take? And so ensuring that we're getting those two lenses there. And again, Michael Franti, who's a musician who I admire and adore a lot, he has in the lyrics of one of his songs, you know, are you a part of the pollution or are you a part of the solution? And I think what Compass does is sharpen our perspective so that we can make better choices. So it's very easy to say make good choices, but it's really hard to do that. And we can never make perfect choices, but only better ones. And I think Compass is a really cool tool to enable us to think in those different dynamics and ways. Another example from personally is you don't have to be this excited about riding a bike, but I just finished riding around New Zealand, so I was pretty happy to be done. And so are my legs. But when we're doing these sorts of things, how does that connect to good health and well-being? Sustainable cities and communities. When you're riding a bike, you're sending a message to your government that cycling infrastructure is important, even if it's only one idiot with a bicycle trailer, but it can catch on. And then of course, climate action. So this is where for me, it's so important to have that micro perspective in a macro context, or macro perspective in a micro context, you know, and mixing up those things and making them really fruitful. And then I want to quickly share this one with you. Is I'm very careful using the word help in terms of service. And so this is where I've used Compass a lot in ensuring that service isn't about patting poor children on the head and feeling good about yourself, but actually is meaningful. So to check that, we're looking at being active citizens, or being active in citizenship and community participation. And so my favorite example is looking with students to say, how do we know good intentions are going to equal good outcomes? And so I'm great at throwing provocations at students and then say, okay, cool, good luck. And they're like, oh, that's something interesting to think about. But then boof, they're off doing their next lesson or whatever it is. And so Compass, when I use my little tips and tricks and quips, bloody hell, that's hard to say on an early Saturday morning, is that we want our students to ground themselves in the practice of actually doing it. And that's where Compass hits the ground running, because they have to go through the model and actually place the pieces together. So clothing donations is my favorite. I have a pet peeve with clothing donations. I personally think they do more harm than help most of the time. Most clothing donations get incinerated, put into landfill, but somehow we feel good because we've put it in a box and we think it's going to go to some poor African child who doesn't even want that clothing, isn't culturally appropriate, is undermining the local economy. I'm not going to get on my soapbox. But anyway, if you put clothing donations through the Compass grinder, you will find that it has pros and cons. And I'm not saying that clothing donations can't be good, but you've got to be pretty good at knowing that it's going to be more help than harm. And so what I love is question everything. Don't take anything as face value, and get into the deeper thinking of these things. And just recently at Dulwich and EIM's the group name for our schools, and Dulwich Green School that we have as part of our group, we've been doing this thing called ESG reporting. Very businessy type thing, quite boring, designed for investors, blah, blah, blah. But when I bring this down into student-teacher engagement, it actually has really a profound impact. So what does it mean for planet, people, and policy? And so these are really technical, businessy things, but using Compass and those four facets, bringing it into something like ESG, equips our students with this vocabulary and some of these concepts that they can go into university and future jobs and go, yeah, ESG, we did that in year 3. Yep, no dramas. Not MSG, that's a different story. But, you know, we've done these businessy type things. And so they will take something like ESG, environment, social governance reporting with Deloitte and blah, blah, blah. They're going to take that and it'll be regenerative, restorative, you know, who knows, but it'll be Compass reporting in the future. Let's see. But they're dealing with these concepts and ideas and really trying to make them practical and make sure that they're happening. Young people are pissed off that we keep on talking about making change and it's not happening. Greta, love her to pieces, kind of represents the sentiment of anyone who cares. So this is how we can make these things actually happen. Okay, sorry, I hopefully haven't gone too long there, but my last provocation for you is, what are your teaspoons of change? How can you, from this event with us and the wonderful speakers who come before and after me and the conversation we'll have in Q&A, how can we take something away from this, you know, understanding the Compass more, looking at how our small actions multiplied by lots of people can and will create big change. So I'm always thrilled to be on these calls and have a chat with people, really utilize tools like Compass and share them as far and as widely as we possibly can. There's some older things. I haven't looked at Instagram for years, so probably don't go there. Don't use Facebook anymore. Yeah, anyway, I'm around. You'll find me somewhere, somehow. Thanks, people. Gitanjali, back to you. Let me stop sharing screen. Cool. Cheers.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Darcy. That was really insightful. I really appreciate how you're thinking about scale and how our personal connection can relate to these really global issues. Just taking those teaspoons of change, those tiny steps, and finding the tools that help us do that can help us be global citizens and really encourage our students as well to think about that personal connection. What are the tools that are going to help them do that? So thank you so much for that overview. And I'm excited to hear another take on how we can cultivate student agency from our next speaker. So Lynda Rolph is she was trained and she worked as a primary teacher in London before moving to Chiang Mai to teach science in a bilingual school. Lynda spent many years working with the Barge program, developing programs and facilitating environmental education experiences around Thailand. Currently, she is head of community at Traidhos 3-Generation Community for Learning in Chiang Mai, Thailand. So Lynda, I'm going to hand it over to you for some more insights and ideas.
Thank you very much, Gitanjali, and good morning, good evening to everybody. Thank you for that introduction. So yes, head of community at Traidhos 3-Generation gives me the opportunity to touch many students who come for different forms of field trips over the year. Some of them may come just for a day. Some of them may come for a week, or we do a project that lasts longer, connecting with the school. So our challenge is to find how we can very quickly make a connection between the things that are happening on the field trip and real life. We know that the students that come to us are very good at accessing issues about forests or water. They can Google it, they can read news items, they're full of the woes that social media brings them. But really, we want to empower students, because if they're empowered, that the buzzword at the moment of climate stress and anxiety over the bad news of the environment, suddenly you've got control. And if you're able to take control, then you stop having such deep worries and concerns about these bigger issues. If you can think about what's happening locally, and you can begin to say, oh, I can make a difference. As Darcy said with his teaspoons of change, central to our mission is making lifestyle choices that are going to reduce your impact and your footprint. So to do that, we feel that the young people that come through our programs really need to have the opportunity to realize that they are part of what's going on. And so for us to use the compass tools really helps students to see connections and start to think systemically. So I'll share my screen and just show a few pictures as I talk through some of the other things that I would like to share with you. So long ago, we would bring students and they may plant some trees in the mangrove. But as all of us know, that's not good enough anymore. We need students, first of all, to know why they're planting the tree. We need them to understand the role that these trees are going to have within the coastline, within the local area, within encouraging biodiversity into the habitat, within filtering some of the pollution from the local industry. And so alongside any action that might happen, there has to be the observations, the games, the understanding, the knowing how this fits into the bigger picture of the area that we're in. And so if students are going to plant a tree, they need to understand what's going on in the area if there are no more trees, what that tree is going to change in that environment, how it's going to affect migratory patterns of birds coming from Europe to Southeast Asia, how it's going to impact the way rubbish could be trapped now in the roots. What's going to be the consequence of that tree, the positive, the negative. So it's no good just having isolated activities for our program. They have to be rooted holistically. And by looking at the parameters given by the Nature Economy Society and Wellbeing, the students are able to have a better understanding of what their action is actually achieving, or if they believed it was going to be negative, what those unexpected consequences might be. And I think when students start to realize that they're actually regenerating environments, and that the regeneration of those environments will support life on land, back to the SDGs, they're going to have greater biodiversity. Suddenly they're empowered. So, okay, what next? And then what are you going to do back at school? Is that going to be the end of it? Or are you, having spent time paddling around amongst plastic bags and yogurt pots, are you going to take this back? And are you going to advocate with the people that you come in contact with at school? Are you going to work with younger students in your school? Are you going to campaign more with local vendors around that area to have more sustainable packaging? What is your action next? Because what we do on the trip isn't the end in itself. It's the next step for your further action, for you as a global citizen thinking like, oh, I know some of these issues. What's my next problem that I can tackle? In Chiang Mai, there is huge issue with high levels of PM 2.5, as there are in many of the countries that you're watching from. And this is something that I think you can feel you have no control on. And it's something that students hear about, they live through, but what can we really do? They're fed the information from the media, but actually, what do you know about it? So we had the opportunity to work with a group of Thai schools in an area experiencing very high PM 2.5. And through partnering with the university, with doctors that could come and give some of the background that we to understand why the PM 2.5 is so dangerous for us. We used pyramid light as the structure of the two-day program, looking at what the issue is with the guest speakers, the experts from the local government, from the university, and then what can we do about it, and what action can we actually make change about. We can't affect air currents coming from neighboring countries, but we can look at locally what's going on. We can look at the habits of the way products are gathered on the mountainside, and we can make sure that we source our honey or our mushrooms or whatever it is from the certified people. So we can raise awareness with the students that these certifications do exist. We can bring them to meet the people that do the certification so that they understand more. We talk a lot about, oh, it's the forest fire that's causing the pollution, but none of the students had ever been out on the forest. So I feel it's really important that we connect young people to communities so that they're seeing firsthand. Again, they used Compass in their interview and their information collection with the forest rangers, with the local people on the mountain. And then they supported the rangers for a while in clearing some of the fallen leaves, which are one of the issues in the area where we live for the high level of burning on the forests. So getting the students connected and seeing for themselves so that they have that personal connection and that personal understanding. And then after hearing from experts, doing seeing face to face, then working with their own school, with projects that can take action in their immediate area. So for some of these students, leaves are a big issue. Culturally, you burn leaves to get rid of mosquito, you burn leaves to get rid of the leaves regularly in the evening. But we connected with a local NGO that was actually turning the leaves into sustainable bowls. And the sustainable bowls could then be used at community events. In the north of Thailand, funerals generate big groups and you feed people at funerals. And there's a lot of styrofoam and plastic used for those things. So if the students could collect the leaves, they wouldn't have the burning of the leaves. And then they could sell their leaf bowls to the temples so that the temples didn't need to generate single-use plastic, single-use styrofoam use. And the students knew the temple because it was in their community. And the students could see that if they were collecting the leaves, there were less fires and their immediate area was contributing much less to the local issue. So this was one of the projects that came out of the weekend with one of the village schools. And it brought people together. It made the students feel part of the community. It helped them realize, oh, I am empowered. I can do something that's making a difference. And there was for them the unexpected consequence of reducing rubbish at the temple because of their leaf bowls. With the youngest visitors that come, I think it needs to be about connection. So using versions of connection circles where students are realizing that everything is interconnected, that they are part of a system. So after a river observation, and we've seen boats and temples and fish and all sorts, how do each of those factors interconnect? What positive, what negative impacts do they have on each other? And then what happens if I'm in that circle as well? And how do I connect with the boat? Perhaps I have a choice. Do I go by an electric boat or do I go by a diesel boat? Do I support feeding fish that are non-native species in front of the temple, or do I find another way to make merit in my community? So looking at my role in this community so that when the students return to school after their few hours of being with us, they know that they've got a connection with the river. It isn't just far away from where my school is. They know that that's the water that comes out of their shower. They know that some of their grey water is going back to the river, but they also are empowered to make choices about how long their showering lasts, so that they consider how much grey water they're creating. They've got the motivation because they can see they are part of the system, and they're not above it or apart from it. We seem to do a lot of making connections. When we're in the forest, how are we connected? What happens if we change some of those parameters? What happens if we plant non-native species tree? What happens if the deer population is removed? And what happens to me in the city that doesn't feel anything to do with the forest? So I think all of the time, finding ways that students do feel that they are connected, and that they realize that any change can have the positive or the negative impact. And for us, using compass tools, looking at iceberg and looking deeper about, well, why is this happening? These are the tools that are changing the way students think. And so they may forget a boat they saw, or the tree that they were seeing in the forest. But if they are using this way of thinking for the length of our trip, and any work that we do with the teachers before or after, that's a tool that stays with them, a tool that they can then apply to whatever subject matter or situation or student council that they may be in the future. Developing this habit of minds that you're not separate from what's going on, but you're an integrated part of the world around us. My final point was one of our Chiang Mai projects, and we had some Bangkok students who traveled to do a survey trip in an area that their school was looking at having a service project. So the students created a map that showed what was going on in their village, what was happening that was perhaps dangerous in the area that affected their well-being, what was good in the area as far as the environment was concerned, where there were places for income to be generated. And so after they had done their research using the compass tool, they returned to school and worked on that to develop their project. And then they came back a few months later with the rest of their student class to continue and carry out their project. And that this school connects to this village over several years. So the project has sort of been a longer ongoing project, but students could see that their project was created out of an identified need, talking to stakeholders in their community. And at the end of the project, not only did the students turn that wasteland that had attracted undesirables to be hanging out in that land, but students realized themselves this motivation that comes from working on a project that has meaning and purpose and need, working alongside community members. And I think that it's this motivation that student agency gives to students. It suddenly is an empowering means, so that they feel that by this connection, by taking action through researched reasons, and not just okay, let's go and do this project, paint a wall. It's a reason that we're doing it. It connects into what's happening. And I think that when students can see that their projects are making a difference, when their personal actions are making a difference, that it will contribute to them feeling more secure in these critical times, when all around them are messages of loss of species, rising climate, which they cannot directly change, but they realize they can make little changes, and all the people around them making little changes contribute to a collective change and the advocacy which can lead to these bigger problems being solved. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lynda, for sharing. I really love how, you've kind of echoed what both Britta and Darcy have said. You talked about how having these tools to cultivate thinking are transferable for different contexts, and you were able to use them with many different groups that you've worked with. And like Darcy, you were talking about how those personal actions, those personal steps can help you start to feel like you have more of a sense of control, a sense of connection to what's going on. And I love how you really dived into the importance of context. Really thinking about your context, really thinking about your community, what your opportunities are, what your role can be very empowering and really enhance that sense of agency through that understanding. So fantastic to hear more from you. Thank you so much. I'm very glad that we have one more panelist who's going to share yet another perspective on how we can cultivate agency. I am happy to introduce Steve Sostak. Following 15 years of teaching elementary and middle school in the US, Peru, Malaysia, and China, Steve now specializes in embedding sustainability, civic literacies, eco-media, and engaged global citizenship into whole schools, libraries, classrooms, and student-centered learning experiences. As director of Inspire Citizens, he has years of international experience with diverse communities, environments, and curricula, where he co-creates strategic initiatives, projects, and learning design. Steve, would love to hear from you more about your approach and your work.
Awesome. Well, thanks for inviting me. And yeah, like Darcy said, that was a little bit long. In the end, I think the first thing that described me is, I'm a teacher first, right? I came from the classroom. There's a huge story there that kind of, makes that shift into Aaron and I starting Inspire Citizens. But I'm actually going to ask us to do just a quick 30-second reset. And what I would love to do, because what Inspire Citizens really looks at is taking things like the compass and then say, what is it? How do we manifest this on the ground? We talked about being in the weeds, and what does that look like when students are doing it and sound like, et cetera. So let's just kind of close our eyes for a second and take a breath. And I want you to visualize like a sensory experience, whether you're working in experiential learning, whether you're at schools, whether you're in administration and in an NGO. And let's ask ourselves, like, what does engaged global citizenship or education for sustainable development, or whatever we want to call it, what does it look like? What does it sound like? Does it feel like, both with the hands and the heart? Maybe what does it taste like? Are we cooking, right? And even the smells, like we talked about being outside just now, and the different things that we're smelling in our environment, and we're coming to terms with our senses. And what I then want to do is, when we open our eyes here, I'm going to go right to my slides, and I want to share sort of a sensory walkthrough of those things and what Inspire Citizens does. So let me go to my slides. As you're ready, you can open your eyes. So, ostensibly the quote at the top we actually got from our podcast. We have an Empathy to Impact podcast that's all about student voice, students owning their learning and impacting their communities. And there was one at IS Dakar in Senegal that said, nothing about us without us is for us. And it was all based on that idea, I think, of Hamilton, right? I want to be in the room where it happens, right? And if we're not giving our kids that agency throughout, whether it's their projects, whether it's unit design, whether it's their experiential learning, there's not always a lot of that sense of buy-in. And one thing I also want you to notice in this picture is the smiles. Like when we talk about sustainability, we need to look inward as well. I'm going to talk about that briefly, but that concept of, are we going in to then go out? What's our inner sustainability look like? So that when we go out into the world, that we can provide more compassion, understanding, and take informed action, like Darcy also said, that's action that actually meets the needs of the different communities we're working with. So, and as a father, these are my 3 daughters. As a father, I know firsthand, if their voice is not in the space, there's no buy-in, right? I mean, right away, my personal experience right there, from being like, what is my life at home to what is my life as a teacher, and now as, I guess, a quote unquote consultant, is making sure the kids are there. Because in the end, this is about the kids shaping the world. We're not preparing them for the world. We're giving them the tools to shape a better future. So I mentioned this really quickly. If you're interested first and foremost on learning more about stories about, kids around the world having this kind of impact, I'd really suggest Scott Jameson. He works for Inspire Citizens, and he does a beautiful job interviewing kids that are doing exactly what you see in that gray box at the bottom. And right now we're at, I think, our 20th episode. And it's just a lovely podcast that it gives me goosebumps every time I hear it. I'm waiting for a bad episode. And Scott just keeps delivering. And, when you hear the kids and they care and they're joyful and they're creative and they're imaginative, it just resonates. It's hard not to just enjoy and see and be inspired to see, again, what you can then do in your context through those lenses. So this is something I always start with. It's just like, this is the landscape right now. Right? We're in a VUCA world. And again, helping our kids and ourselves to, actually shape it, have the tools, the resources, the thinking, the heart, the actions that we can do. It's a critical piece for us to also feel a sense of joy and happiness, because our anxieties are reduced when we actually have agency and action. So why are we not? What's keeping us from doing those things? And my answer should be, it's nothing really. We just have to address them. We can't be fearful of having these conversations, right? Climate change is here. Social polarization is here. AI and technology is here. Biodiversity loss is here. Mental well-being is an issue. Equality and inequality is here. And we always then ask, what does this mean for teaching and learning? And if you ask those questions and you start to back map from that, and again, what we want the kids to be able to do and what the kids want to be able to do, we can always align standards and stuff to that. But we have to make that shift. And, we talked a little also about economics. I think something we always forget, and especially those of us that are working primarily in international schools, is we have to open the conversation on economic equity. I work a lot at Western Academy Beijing right now because I'm stuck in Beijing. And often when they talk about equity, I say, how serious are you about that? DEIJ is fantastic. It's incredibly important. We got to go down that path. But if we're not looking at reevaluating what is success and what is the economics of the future, donut economics, for example, then we're kind of missing the boat. And getting kids into that space too, because they want different, definitions of success. But we have systems in place that are only pushing us in one direction, mainly in our schools towards academic achievement and university acceptance. And I think that's something we need to really have open and honest conversations about. Just briefly here, this is what we do at schools. We work up towards number 9, and you see the bird right there. Everything we do is grounded in compassion, connection, understanding, and action. And our goal is to get to a point where kids are demonstrating and really living engaged global citizenship. And that word engaged is important. We actually took that from Thich Nhat Hanh's work in engaged Buddhism, and saying, like, we're learning all this stuff, but we can't stay in the cognitive space. We're just on the inside. We've got to go out and we got to do something. And the kids then have an opportunity to do it. And that becomes what the whole school is built to do, giving the kids the voice and the agency. We do a lot of work also with educators. This is something that I'm involved with coming up on, again, designing learning experience for things I was just talking about. But what I wanted to show you too is this is actually something recently where the kids are actually leading the strategic planning of the school. They've been given the keys. They trained with us. We've given them the work on futures thinking and strategic foresight. And now they're putting their parents into 2050 scenarios about what is the future we want. And then we back map from there to set forth on the strategic plan of the school. And again, with Compass, this is all interrelated. You're going to see nature in here. You're going to see society in here. You're going to see economics in here. And obviously, you're going to see well-being in here. And that really, my experience with Compass, that was really the launching point for me. My turning point was actually my Compass training. And that's what then inspired me to begin Inspire Citizens. Again, this is something I think is important. Schools, we often stay here. We're very much in the cognitive space with our empathy, with what we do in schools, with our test taking, et cetera. And what we do with Inspire Citizens is we then say, let's extend the purpose. Let's go deeper, such as sustainability. But then also, what are we going to do with our learning? And allowing the kids a sense of voice in that. Something we also do is we actually let kids plan their own units with teachers. This was a work we did at Beijing City International School around humane technology and brain science around tech and media. And the first thing the teachers noticed was, holy crap, the kids know a lot more than we thought. So we don't have to teach all this pre-teaching of all of this content, because the kids are smarter than us in that content, right? And getting the kids in that space, giving them the agency to decide what they want to do with it. And the teachers get so liberated too, because then it's what a great pre-assessment, but also what a great way to move that co-creation forward. Students and teachers co-creating learning together. Something that we've also found is a lot of times we work in schools and teachers and students are often like, I don't know what to do. You know, what is action? What is agency? What does that mean? So we often provide, sentence stems, examples of way to get kids into those spaces of thinking. And you can see multitudes of things that you can do in enhanced spaces of action. And then there's that piece again of co-creation, right? So, we run student change makers and leadership programs around the world, helping kids get in, really getting them in a space of having a toolkit. You can see this little word back here, vocation. This idea of like, what do I love? What does the world need? It's like ikigai, right? And then you put it together. Now I've got something I want to do. And this particular activity works splendidly for personal projects, PYPX, CAS projects, et cetera. But I would argue this could be happening in almost every classroom every day. We've also been looking a lot at what we call ego to eco. This idea when we do leadership, how is it that we get from that hierarchical setup to understanding ourselves in more of a interbeing ecosystem? And this is the work, again, I'm doing with Frankfurt this year with my colleague Ivy Yan here from Beijing. We're working with teachers all through Europe on centering student changemaker programs through ego, from ego to eco. Acknowledging our egos, not burying our egos, but knowing that it's there. This just happened a couple of weeks ago. That was just a big event. We're a part of the Interdevelopment Goal Education Hub. These are basically saying, look, SDGs are fantastic, but if we're selfish, if we're still living in our bubbles, right? If we're not willing to be vulnerable, if we're not willing to co-create, right? If we're not willing to be different on the inside, we're not really going to get to the SDGs. The SDGs in the end are targets. They're things we can frame our learning. They're things we can frame student agency with, but we also got to go inside. And this is just Thich Nhat Hanh's quote that I use a lot, right? I mean, this is it. If we can go in, then we can go out, and vice versa. So a few other quick things. I know we don't have a ton of time, but we do change maker work. This is some stuff I do with Frankfurt again, supporting students on not only running conferences and workshops, but understanding a process of change making so that then eventually that they can go lead it out outwardly facing. So they're going to be running in March 2023 an entire conference on agency and change making for all of Europe, including for adults. And did this last year internally. This was kind of their practice run because COVID kept us a little from expanding beyond, but they did it for 300 kids at their school. Another piece that we've been really pushing recently, and you can imagine with, is leveraging our kids' love of technology and media, right? I'm not advocating for more like screen time, but I am advocating for saying, look, our kids are doing a lot of stuff on Instagram. They're doing a lot of stuff on TikTok. They're doing a lot of stuff in the technology and media space, but we don't leverage that in our classrooms very well because we're afraid. Because again, they're so good at it. And I don't have TikTok. I don't do Facebook anymore. I've never had Instagram. I am a Twitter guy, and Twitter's been awesome for me. But how then do we take media and technology and use it for good? And in this case, we use it through an ecological lens. So this is where we come into deep ecology in media, and we start pushing forward towards things like, how do we use media to reconnect with nature through photography? How do we look at diversity and equity through interviewing and getting into different neighborhoods? How do we celebrate culture and sustainability through the food we eat and create like Jamie Oliver style channels? How do we debate for understanding and for action planning instead of debate for winning? And then also just get out, get your sound recorder out, go listen to the birds. And let's record that, let's make electronic music and so on. And again, that agency, leveraging those types of things that work for kids. And again, you can do it on campus. It's not that hard. Get out there, go look at your buildings. There's geometry in nature. Holy cow, there's geometry in our architecture. Build mosaics, meet your neighbors, go see what it is we eat, the wet market down the street, run and curate museums, write artist statements. It all connects. And then partner. These guys are like a Humans of New York. They're out of the blocks. They run a podcast out of Baltimore. And we've partnered with them for years and bring them alongside us into schools. And we just work on generative conversations and listening. vulnerable conversations where the kids can practice this. They have a deck of cards that's fantastic that we use to spark. But we also find that, you know, who's bad at this? The adults. So we bring this into parent communities, we bring this into the administrative teams, the teacher teams, and we say, look, none of this matters if you guys can't be vulnerable and talk to each other. If we're going to change the system, we got to be willing to have some failures. We got to be vulnerable with what we're afraid of. And then together we have to have a through line that we're here to change the system. And then go do it. Get in your community. Know why you're doing it. Promoting the empowerment of women through technology. They know their targets. Meeting fantastic people. This is Ishmael Bea. Some of my kids got to interview when I was still teaching. Creating, you know, this is a global group out of Australia. High Resolves runs this Videos for Change, 1-minute videos. Pick something you love, storyboard it, write the script, do the post-production, design for change, etc. Media makers, it's all there. Celebrate diversity just on your campus. And then just the last thing I wanted to throw in, because I'm really excited about this. In a week, actually May 16th, we're announcing a partnership with International School Services. So this is a master's program. It's like a full year program, but it does come in chunks. You don't have to take the whole thing. But we're going to be working in that space, and we're going to be running an endorsement in education for global citizenship. And so please don't hesitate to contact me. You can go to our website where it says master's endorsement. You can find out all that information. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. It will make you cry. Prepare for some tears. And just remember this quote. Like, kids got to be there. They got to be in the room where it happens. They got to be at the table. Their voice matters for a number of reasons, for the well-being of nature, society, the future of economics, and the future both inside, you know, personal, others, society, and the planet. So that's my story. So hopefully that was worthwhile. Thanks for listening to, guys. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much for sharing. I think that you really elaborated upon what our other three speakers have done, which is show what does it look like to give students this, you know, realization that they have agency. We don't need to build their agency, they have it. And how do they really seize it? And what are the different ways it can look? Looking inwards, looking outwards, thinking about heads, hands, and hearts, thinking about all the different ways that it can manifest. We want students to engage. And all four of you have been talking about the importance of this agency, why we need it, what can it look like, what tools can help us do it. Before we go into some Q&A, I was listening to you, Steve, and it made me reflect on this question that's really important to us here at Compass, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, which is, what is the role of educators in fostering this agency? What do you see as the main thing that we can be doing as, you know, teachers in the classroom or non-formal educators, or anyone who considers himself an educator? What's our role in this for anyone on the panel to address?
Yeah, I think we need to equip students with the tools of agency. Like they need to be given skills so that they can advocate. They need to be given tools that help them think critically, so that these tools and these ways of thinking become part of them. Because once they start to think in this critical thinking way, then they're able to apply this to all the situations and give the opportunity, time, and space for people to talk together, because all of this isn't going to be achieved if you're just thinking about it on your own. There has to be dialogue.
Definitely. And Darcy, I see your hand up, ready to go.
Yeah, it just avoids three people speaking at the same time on Zoom, so I tend to use that one. And to add to Lynda's thing is adults need this conceptual framework to begin with before they can then pass it on to students. And I think Britta's example was really good, you know, that they got the students to teach adults. So for me, it doesn't matter if it's students first or teachers first. I mean, in Suzhou High School, the Compass facilitators ran a wonderful workshop last weekend. It's my second weekend doing a workshop, but that's all good. Where all the teachers, a bunch of the teachers got on board with the Compass models and concepts and ideas. So then they can have a shared language, and the students are being exposed to that. So for me, it doesn't, like, I don't tend not to just pinpoint students or pinpoint teachers. This is a new framework for anyone, because for some reason, we're not built to be thinking systems wide. In essence, many of us, I should say, Indigenous values are a bit different from other places I've worked. But yeah, so for me, students, teachers, anyone, parents, who can get these conceptual frameworks of systems thinking, it will then start to gravitate and grow its own momentum with shared language, shared concepts, and putting it into practice.
Definitely.
Why don't you go ahead and then I'll jump in after that, if that's okay.
I think something that's really hard for grownups, including me sometimes, is like really modeling and living transformation and change, because it's plastered everywhere now. It's very much like a buzzword of like agents of positive change, and that's a lot easier for youth than it is for a lot of adults. So I think that really means like we have to avoid trying to be like the expert, avoid trying to think everything is fixed, and that, you know, we always have to get things perfect. In reality, it's so messy, and I think we have to be okay with that. We have to be experimental. We have to talk about the ways that our thinking has changed. Like in my context, I know in the beginning we were very much like, woo, like eco warriors, and sometimes like, ooh, eco police. And then, you know, as we all learn together, I think we realized that a lot of the ways that we were approaching sustainability could have been seen as like elitist, which, you know, in a private institution, it's quite possible that that's, you know, what you're working with, but that's where systems can come in and help you change. And you have to be okay with that change, and you have to admit it, and you have to embrace it. And sometimes that's uncomfortable. I also think like we're just starting to understand like the idea around like whitewashed sustainability, especially in the West, because sustainability is a buzzword now. And kids want to say, you know, they've almost been trained, because sustainability is like the goal, to say like everything's sustainable. Your yoga pants made of plastic bottles are sustainable, and like you can buy this thing and you become sustainable. And we have to be able to model the critical thinking and model the questioning, model the change in ourselves. Saying like, yeah, I, you know, something I noticed or something that I used to think, and here's how it changed and here's why. And a lot of that happens through like not centering yourself as the adult or the expert, like as the change maker. Sometimes, you know, in like diversity, equity, and inclusion work, that's referred to as like passing the mic. And as much as in my school, we've tried to like get the kids on the stage and really give them the voice, when we go into another community, it's not us on the stage anymore. Like, it's not us there to save anybody. So it's very much adults, their responsibility is to be flexible. It is to change, embrace it, model it, and like get messy with it.
Yeah, I love all that. And I would say my biggest thing is showing a sense of compassion and empathy for the teacher experience. I think that teachers are often in a space where they get a lot of mixed messages, right? And I know, you know, now that I've come in and I've been working, you know, with a lot of admin teams all the way down to with kids, teachers are often in the middle, right? And I was working on a little bit of an article called Meeting in the Middle, where, you know, especially on the admin side, we have to decide what it is that we value, right? And if we, you know, we say I could pull up 1,000 mission statements that say global citizenship and sustainability, but in the end, let's be honest, it's about the IB scores, right? And that's not to say these other things are not important and they can't get you there, but if we're not even reporting on those things, if we're not even reporting on compassion, reporting being, that can be totally student portfolio driven, mastery competencies, et cetera. But if we haven't set a bar of value for that, and we're just still reporting out and we're looking at that final test or those things, it loses steam quickly. And then teachers live in a space of discomfort and fear, and they become demoralized, right? Because I know that's why I left my job at ISB, was I was feeling like this was something I really wanted to do in my classroom, but it wasn't something that, and it was great, it looked good, but it wasn't necessarily valued out in a way that became a school-wide culture commitment. Right. So I was just kind of like, okay, it's time to try something different, right? So I think we have to be able to give the teachers a sense of security in that, like, look, this matters, and we're going to find a way to put sustainability and global citizenship at least on equal footing as our IB test scores. And I feel like until that happens, it's always going to be a little bit of a struggle for our types of schools, or really any school, to get over that hump. So it's a commitment, and it's a lifestyle change and a mindset and a heart, but I think it is the heart. It's like, do we really want this, right? And that's a big question. Do we really want this or not?
I think that's a great question. And, the four of you, our panelists today, are all clearly showing us how the heart can be a great motivator for doing meaningful work and supporting meaningful work that our students want to go out there and do. So I am going to open it up to Q&A in a second. And I would like to encourage you here, if you have a question, to put it in the chat or put your hand up so that we can hear from you. To get us started, while you're all taking a moment to think, I have a question pulled from our registration forms that you all filled out. And my first question for the panelists from those registration forms is about, to read it exactly, why is it so difficult to gain traction in this idea of building student agency? We've been talking about it for some time. What have been some of the barriers that we're dealing with?
I'll just kick off with a quick comment on that one, if that's okay. I mean, change is always difficult. So we can't be on this call and not expect anything to go smoothly. Change for any of us, is difficult. Okay, we're going to use Teams instead of Zoom. You tell us that 10 minutes before we're going to do it, everyone's going to freak out a little bit for a moment. So we're in, that's the sector that we're in, is to create change. So I won't speak directly to student agency. I think the other guests are a bit more qualified to do that. But just know that when you are trying to create change, it's never going to be easy, and that's okay. That's the space to be in. So for me, it's just about ensuring that you flood people with context, you put in stepping stones. This is where I use a lot of those quips and those little words to give people stepping stones to work towards things like student agency, because it's vague. The pathway is always vague. And so we just need reassurance, step-by-step processes, whatever it is that people need to ensure that they have control, feel like they have control, and can incrementally make that change.
I think too, that teachers feel uncomfortable because suddenly they're not in control. If you plan your lesson, you know where it's going. But as soon as it's handed over to the students to be coming up with how things are going to move, you don't know what the next step is going to be. And I think for many teachers that are not used to that way of working, it's uncomfortable. And you've got to be quite brave to be able to go forward with your students. And I think moving teachers beyond the comfort zone into this way of working, that you're a partner with your students in a way, that you're not the information giver and the controller of your classroom, is a very big deal.
I'll jump in too. I think a key one is time, right? I have, since I've been working with Inspire Citizens now for about 5.5 years, I've kind of recently, I'm not saying I would never do a impact day or an impact week anymore, but I do think there's a sense of, we have to build these things into our units as much as possible and give teachers and students space. Because again, if we're going to reflect on inner sustainability as well as outer sustainability, we need the space to do that. We need the space to do design thinking, where we're reevaluating what's going on and maybe have time to make a shift. And one example I would say recently was I did a week kind of project-y for change thing recently that it just felt really rushed, right? And then at the same time, I was doing almost a semester-long PYP Art for Impact exhibition with grade 5 at WAB. And the space they had to write their artist statements, to share their inner side, to talk to the ATLs, all of these different things that become giving the kids this space to value other types of learning. So we're not, all right, we finished our project and on to the next thing, we got a new standard to get to. I think there's ways that we can sort of reevaluate the time structures of what's really important, setting some power standards, and then making sure again that this type of learning is valued and we have a chance to grow and reflect together. So time,
Thank you so much for your thoughts on that. I think there's a question in the chat from Ingrid that I'd like to pose to you. Ingrid asks, how do you implement change and protect yourself if you want to make change?
I would say I would say really quickly, Darcy's point on having we call it the constellation mindset, right? We work with kids and teachers on this, is having that network that you can trust, right? So when we work with kids, I got this from a book by Matthew Barzin about Mary Parker Follett's philosophy of change. And it's basically be prepared to be needed, be prepared to need others, be prepared to change. And that's the norms of collaboration for everything we do with kids and teachers. Is you come in with that mindset to the meeting that, like, we're going to work together, we're going to walk out of this meeting or this time together having changed and having felt needed. And I think that mindset of co-creation and creativity and imagination and vulnerability is really key. So that might be something, check that out. It's Matthew Barzin, Constellation Mindset.
And if I'm interpreting the question correctly, I think the idea being, like, as a teacher, sometimes it can be a little scary when your classroom is the messy one. I know in one of my schools, I was praised, like, in a moment where I was giving, a test or something, where in the classroom was quiet and everything looked in order. And I got immediately the message that, like, that makes me look good as a teacher. And then I went to my current school, and honestly, it's just a completely different culture. The kids are generally not quiet. And if you're trying to keep them quiet, it's probably not going to be easy for you. And it's not really what our administrative team are looking for when they're in classrooms. They're looking for teachers to, like, leverage the fact that students want to be, like, highly engaged, social, talking, creating stuff, and how teachers can really work with that and monopolize it. If that's not necessarily the culture at your school, I think this can feel really uncomfortable, but I think it's important to have a one-on-one with folks that might be visiting your classroom. Maybe it's your department head or your team lead, or maybe it's the person that directly supervises you, and to tell them, like, I want to try something new. It might challenge the status quo of what we think, like good teaching looks like, or what, like, classrooms that are under control look like, but I'm asking for your blessing. And sometimes it might be messy, and just, I think it's connecting to that idea that Steve was talking about, like, advocate for what you want and be vulnerable. And hopefully in this day and age, if you're saying that the results are going to be engagement and agency and generation, I think if that's where the conversation is headed, it would be hard for an administrator or a person that may be, like, in your classroom, if that's what you mean by protecting yourself, to deny you that opportunity and to deny the kids that.
Cool, thanks, Britta. You brought up memories of me teaching in the desert in Aboriginal communities in the middle of Australia, where the pride of the schools was the one that was the most assimilated, where the kids sat down and it's like, what, this is horrible. I'd rather be out chasing goannas and quandong trees and, like, see learning in action. So that resonates. And look, my take on this question is entertainment. I find that has worked for me. I mean, that's my style. It's not everyone's style. Like, I really appreciate Steve's more relaxed way of doing things, especially on a Saturday morning, where I'm like, right, cool, let's throw the energy around. And of course, Steve does that as well. But mine is to not to trivialize it, but to make it accessible. So I use this crazy video from Pico Pico, the PPAP, pen, pineapple, pen, blah, 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 SDGs video. I'll put a link to it in the notes, but I use that all the time because it just disarms people of thinking, like, right, global citizenship, I need to give up my life and, go and live in a hut in blah, blah, blah. Where for me, it's about, let's make it fun, exciting, engaging. Our students take these things so seriously sometimes. It's like, create a bunch of memes, like, make fun of yourself, go for a run if that's what you enjoy doing. At Jump Foundation, we had this formula of gift plus passion equals change. Do something you enjoy doing, add it to something you care about, you'll create change. So they're the tools that I tend to use for helping people and supporting people through change. It's just taking the foot off the pedal a little bit, making it a bit more lighthearted, finding somewhere to laugh or make fun of it, or whatever it is to try and get that across. Then Nicole's question around administration, doesn't work quite as well with administration, I've got to say, although they do enjoy a bit of pen, pineapple, pen. So what I use there is the language on the street. So ESG isn't something I'm particularly fond of as a concept. I think it's great for greenwashing, for corporates that have a lot of money to spend on, greenwashing their way out of trouble. But if we can take ownership of those things and bring it to our school administration and show that this has a double, triple, benefit to you, your school, the running of it, etc., you're going to get credibility. We're going to increase sustainable literacy, global competency. Here's the package. So for me, I try and grab hold of things that exist in the world that don't necessarily have a school or an education lens on it, and try and put that into schools and show, hey, this is a really useful concept, and then Trojan horse everything. Like, here's this thing called ESG, and then do the hell whatever I want, because our administration think I'm doing something that's, official and normal. And then we're just having those quality conversations with students and teachers, like the panel has been talking about all day. So yeah, there's my take.
I think we're so lucky to have your thoughts on these questions. And I would love to ask our panelists if they're okay with it to add their contact information to the chat, so you can follow up with them if you'd like to. I encourage you all to add your contact information in their panelists if you could. And to help wrap us up today, I actually am going to pull an amalgamation of some different questions we received in the registration form. And panelists, I'm going to kind of put you into a critical thinking moment on the spot and try to encourage you to narrow down to just a few sentences. What is the one next step that you would recommend an educator take if they're just beginning this journey of being intentional in building student agency? What would you encourage a teacher or maybe even a community member to go do if they want to do that as something their next step? So Britta, would you mind starting us off? What's something that you'd encourage people to go do?
In terms of getting, sorry, I was typing in the chat, so multitasking wasn't good for my brain there. In terms of getting student agency off the ground, or just?
Yeah, taking their first steps to building this more.
Needed a little bit of think time. Maybe I would say it's probably good to take an inventory of your personal mindsets first. So reflect with yourself about what you're feeling comfortable with, excited about, uncomfortable with. Find a few people, if you have them in your community, to talk through that with, and then start small. We've done like some PBL type trainings, and there's 7 essential elements, and it's really overwhelming to think like I have to change 7 things. So we always say, like, start with 1, throw 1 or 2 things into your practice. And I think student agency is the same way. Figure out 1 or 2 things that you can tweak and then go from there.
I'm going to jump in, guys, because I have an eco-media meeting in about 3 minutes. So
perfect.
I think, first of all, 100% agree with what Britta was saying. I also think don't reinvent the wheel, right? We're a network. And I mentioned that, I'm not on much social media, but I am quite active on Twitter and sharing the types of things I've shared today. And I think that having these types of conversations and being, again, ego to eco, right? Being willing to move away from this is all about us or me or our organization or whatever, into a space that we are a system and an ecosystem working together to make the world a better place. I think that's a huge step. So if you're feeling like you're in a pocket, or if you're feeling like you're alone and you need some support, we're here, right? Whether that's through just following us on Twitter, getting into these conversations, reaching out to some of us via email, taking a master's course, little plug there, but like all of these things that are out there for you to know that we're here to help, right? And that's what's exciting. And we're here to model, and we're here to listen, and we're here to contextualize and personalize, right? And I think being a part of a community that's what it's all about, right? So, that will be my kind of quiet goodbye, because I know I'm so happy to be a part of this community, and just so much gratitude for everybody that's here today. And I hope to continue to hear from all of you, and look forward to this next time. Okay.
Thank you, Steve. We appreciate that so much. I'd love to leave a little bit of space to hear from Lynda and Darcy as well. So Lynda, you're next.
Yes, I think be brave. Find a friend that's got the same sort of mindset as you, so that you can go and cry over coffee when everything is chaotic. And start small. So if you don't feel brave to start with your whole class, you know, perhaps it's a co-curricular that you're running or something like that, and find the need on your doorstep that's going to be easy. So it might be, I don't know, buddy benches in the junior school playground, something that isn't huge, or, you know, what's the audit that the students see as a need in their school community, and start with that very small thing with the small group of passionate kids and go for it. And I think we all learn, and we're all reevaluating after everything that we do. So the first step is the step to start to make it happen. You can think about it, and it would be a good idea, but go for it.
Thank you, Lynda. And Darcy, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, when it all boils down to it, for me, it's that your actions matter. And so teaspoons of change for me isn't about turning off the lights. It's the fact that you're making a connection between your brain, your heart, and your hand to turn off the lights, because you know that that's connected to energy that pollutes our air or whatever it is. So that's the significance. The electricity you save, cool, that's great. A little bit of coal, wonderful. But it's the fact that you care, the fact that you've made that connection between your actions and their impact. And so to kind of bring this back to Compass, this is where I think and we've only sort of shown the Compass tools, but there are many others, the iceberg, all those other things. So for me, these things help me to share with students, staff, schools, etc., to show that your actions matter, and that when you make good actions, they have good impacts, and to try and do that as often as we can, when we can.
I love that, thinking about what we can do and really leaning into it. And I'd like to also share, just as we're wrapping up today, if you are interested in learning more, you've heard several opportunities to continue your own learning, lots of resources in the chat. I encourage you to scroll back up and take a look at some of the things in there. And I'm sharing right now with you some of the other things we have going on here at our nonprofit at Compass Education that you might want to engage in. We have some free resources on our website for learning more, particularly about these tools that have been mentioned, the compass, the iceberg, this pyramid. We have some courses as well that can get you thinking more deeply about systems thinking and sustainability. And we also have some workshops and some professional learning we do with schools, school communities, and really cultivating that shared language and understanding of what you can work towards. So just sharing these out. Also, if you are looking to share something cool that you're doing, we have this Compass Challenge happening right now, this Changemaker Challenge, where we're getting videos from educators and students all over the world talking about how they're using systems thinking tools to make a difference on an issue they care about, like you've heard from Britta and Darcy and Steve and Lynda. So we invite you to take part in this challenge as well. And as we wrap up today, I'm just going to leave up this slide to encourage you to connect, because we've heard connection is important for feeling like we can make a difference, gaining that confidence to really step back and put our students in the driver's seat, so to speak. And while I leave this up here, I would like to say again, a massive thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you, Britta, Darcy, Lynda, and Steve, for all of the wisdom you've shared with us today. It's been fantastic to hear from you, and we're so grateful for all of the time you've taken today with us. So thank you so much, everyone. That is the end of our webinar, and we look forward to speaking more with you in the future about this. Feel free to stay in touch.